WisconsinEye's Campaign 2024 programming is sponsored by Wisconsin Counties Association, Nicolet National Bank, Wisconsin Hospital Association, Operating Engineers Local 139, the Wisconsin Realtors Association, the Wisconsin Laborers District Council, and North Central State's Regional Council of Carpenters. To support programs like this, please consider a tax-deductible donation at wiseye.org/donate or by texting WisEye to 44321.
Joe Plouff of Chippewa Falls is the Democratic candidate for the 92nd Assembly District. The election is November 5th. Joe Plouff, welcome to WisconsinEye.
Thank you so much, Lisa. I appreciate this.
Well, we want to hear what is your campaign's key message and why are you running for this office?
Right. My key message is really wrapped into why I am running. Okay. I have been in the legislature before. I have been out of the legislature for 20 years. What I see going on down there makes me very frustrated. We can do better. I know we can do better. We have done better. There is no reason a legislature should ever hold a University of Wisconsin system hostage. There's no reason for a legislature to bind the hands of local government and not allow them to do the job that they need to do for their citizens. I have a long history of being on Menominee City Council, 4 terms in the state legislature, and on the Dunn County Board of Supervisors. I believe government works when it's allowed to work. I believe we have rigged this system through gerrymandering for the last 30 years to the point where the system is no longer working for the citizens. That is creating the anger that we see, and that, I believe, is part of the whole MAGA fiasco that we're running into.
So if you're elected, what's an example of a bill that would be a priority for you to introduce?
The number one priority is that we must come up with a method for nonpartisan redistricting. You asked me about why I'm running. Very briefly, when I looked at my old district and when I looked at the city of New Richmond I used to represent, there were 4 areas in northern New Richmond that were taken as plugs, if you will, out of northern New Richmond and placed elsewhere in other assembly districts. That was gerrymandering at its worst. That is a horrendous thing to do to our citizens. And it has such a major, long impact. I believe that no one party should have that kind of dominating control for 30 years. I believe Wisconsin is a purple state, and should we finally recognize and have a legislative system that allows for debate and actual bills that are not just from one side or the other, we're going to have a purple legislature and a purple state. Then that means the citizens, the representatives, have to go back to the citizens. And I, in my case, would have to say, look, people, my constituents, I'm a dark blue legislator, and this policy is what I support and why I support it and why we should have this policy implemented. Whereas rather today it is just red wins, red is proposed, red wins all the time. That's not purple.
So if you're elected, you'll be entering during a biennial budget year, and the state's projected to have now more than a $4 billion surplus.
Okay.
What are your top 2 priorities for use of that surplus funding?
I believe the best thing that we can do is to take a look at that $4 billion and say, hey, what is best for everybody in the state. And for me, it comes down to counseling services. And counseling services mean an infrastructure of counseling.
For mental health?
For mental health, for all of us.
In schools or for children, for adults?
In schools, children, adults, universities. We need more counselors available. We need more places for them to be, whether that is made available through businesses and manufacturing. That's fine too. We must do something with the stresses that we live in and the mental health challenges that such a fast-paced society provides us.
What's the second priority for use of that surplus funding? What about tax cuts, tax reform? Is that in your campaign platform?
Oh, tax reform is. But it would be, I couldn't even begin to explain some creative ideas on what we need to do with our, very briefly, what we need to do is we need to look at all the ways we exempt taxes and redetermine whether or not they are still valid. Do they still serve the same purpose that they were implemented 50 years ago? What will that tax break, if it were to remain, what would it look like 25 years in the future? So that's a whole nother discussion, and I don't know if one legislator can come up with that.
But do you think that's necessary for tax reform?
It is necessary.
What about in terms of spending, what about K-12 education? Where does that fit within your priorities?
Hugely. I'm a former teacher. K-12 education. It's education that is the basis for solving the rest of our problems.
So a broad increase for K-12 education, or are there certain areas of K-12?
Oh, there's two that I would like to highlight. Number one, we need to look at the funding mechanism. Number two, we need to look, can the citizens of Wisconsin afford a two-tier educational system? And we need to look at the vouchers. I do not believe that public money should be skimmed off the top of public schools and sent to private schools. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm the product of a private school. My parents did the right thing when I was a youngster. They sent me to that Catholic school, and I benefited from it. They paid for it. It was their choice.
We should get back to that system of no public dollars?
Exactly. Now, I know that there are, even though what I just said, I'm not bashing private education. We could take some of that $4 billion and say, okay, private schools, we are going to start reducing on a yearly basis the vouchers that are coming in. But we're going to help you out right now, and we're going to use some of that surplus to backfill, if you will.
What about higher education? You mentioned that at the beginning. The state's 4-year colleges, 2-year colleges, technical colleges. What does the future of that system look like to you, and where should the legislature focus?
The legislature is always going to have to focus on what is going on currently and looking to its future. I believe very strongly in the Wisconsin idea, an old concept that needs to be, I wouldn't say dusted off, but it needs to be reinvigorated maybe. Okay, let's bring that back and let's put our educational system to work for all of us.
Do you support full funding for the Universities of Wisconsin system?
Of course I do. Yes, we have to have funding for schools. That's part of the whole issue why I am running again. We re-rigged so much of our infrastructure and our institutions in the last 30 years that they're left begging. It's time to stop the begging. It's time to put things back to work. New ideas, new forward-looking, but we can't just continue on this way of tax cuts constantly.
What do you see as the state's largest workforce development challenge, and how would you address it?
Oh, that's a multi-layered question. The first thing you need to start with is, we need to respect We need to go back to the days when teachers were respected. When my father was a construction worker, he was respected as such. He was also paid. My father, I grew up in a family that one person could work, and that family could be supported. That's what we need to get back to.
What's the state's role in getting back to that? What policy lever is that?
What policy lever? Okay. I think the state needs to take a look at how it directs economic development funds to the local municipalities. I'm not so certain that we should be funding just everything that comes along. We need basic infrastructure again. We need people working in our nursing homes. What I'm telling you right now is decisions have to be made. Do we need another fast food restaurant on that corner? Or do we need nursing home people?
So the state directing the dollars towards certain industry. I have a couple more workforce questions for you. Investments in public and energy infrastructure grow our state's economy. This also provides an opportunity to invest in our state's workforce, but currently there are no requirements for hiring local workers. Would you support a state resident hiring requirement for state, local, and utility scale infrastructure investments?
I would need more information on that. I'm not that well acquainted with it, but you know what? The people deserve to hear an answer. And I think on the spur of the moment, I can give you, I hope, a thoughtful answer. And it would be this. It's always best to support your local people. Whether I go shopping at my local food cooperative or whether I go shopping at, hiring for the remodel of my house. I would support that a condition, if it's legal, and I don't know if it is, a preference for local hiring. I think we can do it for purchasing items, so I can't imagine you can't do it for employment as well.
Employee classification is an issue in the construction industry. Some employers misclassify workers as independent contractors or pay them in cash off the books. This lowers costs by avoiding payroll taxes and unemployment insurance, and it puts compliant companies at a disadvantage when bidding on projects. Plus, misclassified workers may be denied minimum wage protections or overtime pay. Are you aware of this, and what should be done about it?
I am aware of this. And I'm going to give you a broader answer specifically to this. The economy and the social system that we have been working under is rigged. Part of the rigging is you cut the, you make the cuts in agencies at the bottom. So therefore, too often, whether it be environmental, whether it be educational, or whether it be workforce development, the people that have and keep an eye on things are no longer there. So therefore, it begs the question, number one, I believe very strongly that we should not, I got to say this correctly, we should not be allowing the misclassification of workers. But that also then means we need the boots on the ground and the fingers on the keyboard to make certain that they're being watched so that it's not happening.
The oversight piece. Affordable rental housing is an issue in Wisconsin. Some support government-imposed rent control to maintain affordability, while others argue keeping rent artificially low will decrease rental supply, resulting in increased prices. What is your sense of housing as an issue, and which do you think best addresses rental housing affordability? Is it rent control, building more rentals, or some other solution?
I think there's a lot of different solutions, and one of them is rental control. That's not up to the legislature. We have to allow that local unit of government that knows best to make that decision, and that's the municipalities, that's the villages, that's the counties. With that being said, I just happened to knock on the doors of an apartment building I used to live in today. The quality of that apartment complex has deteriorated to the point where it is just simply sad. I was in 1980-ish in a new building. Now 40-some years later, this thing, I believe, is dangerous. Now, what does that mean for all of us? It means a lot, because if we allow that apartment building to go down, then all of a sudden the property taxes for the whole community is affected.
What's the state's role in that?
Take the state hand off of the backs of government and let the local municipalities do their job in inspection and enforcement of substandard housing. Then there's also the issue of out-of-state entities that come in, purchase a lot of rental property, and then all of a sudden those buildings, and I'm talking UW Stout, I'm talking Menominee, City of, in an area where all of a sudden they're not considered housing anymore, housing stock. They're considered, how many beds do you rent out every day? Once that tradition, or excuse me, is moved over, all of a sudden that property is not valuable anymore. It's not intended to be valuable anymore. It's just something to move around.
Commodity. Medical systems are facing numerous headwinds in the form of inflation, workforce development, and issues around Medicare and Medicaid reimbursement, resulting in fewer services and even the closure of a hospital system here in western Wisconsin. What would you do to preserve access to care and prevent future closures?
First of all, the simplest one is you go to the federal government and you say, we made a mistake. For 20 or 15 years, whatever it is, we have made a mistake. We have denied, we have said no to Obamacare, and it's working everywhere else. We need it now to help to put it to work here. But there's more than that, okay? We have to ask some deep questions on how we're funding our hospitals and our systems. I lived up in Barron County for a while. All of a sudden in Barron County, Rice Lake, the birthing services went away. So therefore, what would happen is people in my area in Barron County had to go to Menominee for birthing services. Guess what happened in Menominee? The birthing clinics closed. So therefore, the next alternative is Eau Claire and Chippewa Falls. Guess what happened?
Do you support increasing the Medicaid reimbursement rate to hospitals?
The medication reimbursement rate has got to go up.
Got to go up. What about mental health care? You mentioned that, and counseling services is a priority for you. Is that the main solution you're proposing around mental health care, is expansion of counseling?
I would be open to other ideas, but yes, as a basis to start with, I think yes, we have to expand the number of opportunities for people to, not only the opportunities, but we also have to take away the stigmatism. I take a medication each and every day. 30 years ago, I could not have said that as a politician. Now I can, because so many of us do. It's not a stigma. We need to reduce that stigma even more so.
Sure.
Mental health is not the fault of the person that has the issue.
How should Wisconsin move forward on the issue of abortion?
A woman's right to choose is a woman's right to choose. Not mine, not that person over there, not that guy over there. It's up to the woman who is pregnant to make that decision.
Should there be any number of weeks as a limit?
I was comfortable with Roe versus Wade.
Roe versus Wade. What about transportation? What are the pressing transportation needs in your district, and how important is it that these are addressed, and for the state to keep on schedule with reconstruction of aging interstates and corridors of commerce?
Well, it goes beyond borders of commerce and aging interstates. And I do understand Milwaukee, that something like 30% of the goods and services in the state of Wisconsin pass through that area. But we also have to look up in northern Chippewa County, where the roads are starting to deteriorate. And we have to go back to the Wisconsin idea. Those roads were put there under the Wisconsin idea of the early part of the 1900s because Wisconsin needed a new agricultural system. The universities came up with dairy. To have dairy, you need good roads. The roads were great, but now they're starting to fall apart, and we have to make certain that they do not. We don't want to convert to gravel. That's even more expensive than that. I don't like the idea. I talked with a chair of a county board last night about this. And when I was on the county board, we had a 20-year movement. In a 20-year cycle, all of our county roads would be resurfaced. Then all of a sudden, it's up to 47, I was told.
Because of the state? Is the state?
The funding issues.
Not funding
yes.
from the state.
And then now they've got it down, and do we ask our local counties and municipalities to fund that and add more money to the by referendum to the property taxpayer? I don't think so. Remember, we did not and have not by law increased the gas tax in a long time.
Is that something you support, or you want to think?
We have to have, taxes are a funny thing. You are going to spend money out of that pocket, and you're going to spend it either in taxes or further services. And I would prefer to see that it goes to services like better roads than tax breaks for the way at the top.
What about the environment? PFAS and other water contaminants are a concern for a growing number of Wisconsinites. Is that an issue that concerns you, and how would you address it?
I failed to mention that water was one of my real top contenders. We have to get away from this. We need the counties and the municipalities to be able to create their own shoreland zoning so that surface water is not polluting. We need to have our high-capacity well situation looked at again. There was a time when high-capacity wells were regulated. It's my understanding they no longer are. You can't put more and more straws in the malted milk jar and expect that malted milk to remain high. It just doesn't work that way. We need to do that, and the PFAS issue is we have to say yes, it's a problem.
Sure.
And this legislature has not even gotten to the point of saying it's a problem. They freeze everything because they might step on somebody's toes.
Last two questions for you. How would you describe the leading differences between you and your opponent?
My opponent is a very nice man. Not that I'm not, by the way. He's a nice guy. I think he's a hard worker. He's a chiropractor. I believe that he serves that community well. He is just disenfranchised with the community. Okay, he had a vote no in his business for voting against a revenue for the local is partnering with out of. And he, by the way, is a school board member of that public school. That's a difference.
Final question for you. Let's say you get elected, you're back in the state capitol, and you get a magic wand you can use to resolve one issue in a way that brings all parties, all people together. What is the issue?
Well, quickly, mom and pop, apple pie. No, there isn't anything like that. But a magic wand, it's time just to get together, to look at our party leadership and make certain that our party leadership is not so entrenched and so powerful because of their entrenchment and safely seated that they cannot and do not work together. That, I think, is the problem. Is we need, every legislator should have the ability to become a leader within his or her caucus. And that's not the case today because elections are so expensive that we need leadership under the circumstances today of following and monitoring elections and bringing in more and more money so that they can funnel money to different candidates. That's a whole program in itself.
So your magic wand is used to
campaign finance reform.
campaign finance reform. All right. Joe Plouff of Chippewa Falls, the Democratic candidate for the 92nd Assembly District. The election is November 5th. Joe Plouff, thank you for talking with WisconsinEye.
Thank you for having me.
This programming is brought to you by our generous sponsors. Thank you for watching.